اتولد.
Hey, welcome to Socialism for All. I'm an anti-revisionist Marxist-Leninist who spent thousands of hours of my life studying communism and making available audiobooks and Marxist-Leninist commentary on the internet. And yesterday, September 10, 2025, there was a significant event in US politics. Actually, at this point, we don't know that the thing itself was politically motivated, but we know that it will have political ramifications because the main person involved was political as their professional career. And that person was Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA, a far-right activist who spent his time spreading an extreme right message of hate and intolerance and against civil rights. Personally, I think there is way too much of that in the world, even without Charlie Kirk in it, and that's something that we've got to work on. Anyway, I want to make this quick video to underscore a community post that I made today about this event, because there's so much being said about this online and there's so much speculation, and I want to just try to draw people, kind of back down to earth. I'll just read the post. People calling Charlie Kirk's death a Reichstag fire, and for people who don't know what that is, the Reichstag fire was the burning of the German Parliament building in 1933. The arson was blamed on a communist, but the communists, including Dimitrov, maintained that the Nazis did it themselves as a so-called false flag attack. The Nazis used the event as a pretext for abolishing democratic norms and unveiling so-called emergency laws, similar to the anti-terrorist overhaul of the US government and its client governments after the 9/11 attacks in 2001. Anyway, people referring to Kirk's death as a Reichstag fire type of event seem to be missing that the USA's actual Reichstag fire was 24 years ago this very day. Meanwhile, in 2025, we're already at the point where Trump is declaring quote-unquote war on major US cities like Chicago via social media. And last week, the US Supreme Court said that the racial profiling of suspected immigrants could continue. Just to name a couple of examples, it's extreme. Could it get worse? Of course, things can always get worse, but it's way beyond any kind of, interruption of democratic norms at this point. Charlie Kirk may have been a spokesman for Turning Point USA, but his death should only be a turning point, thank you, for people to pull their heads out of their asses and see how fascist this country already is. The fascism began to be normalized in a serious way decades ago by both Republicans and Democrats. Two great examples are the war on drugs, and then again later the war on terror. US politics will continue to become more fascist, but it won't be because of this. It'll be because capitalism is facing an existential crisis due to its own internal contradictions. And that is going to continue whether you and I like it or not. So the only thing we can do is leftists must study and organize as Marxist-Leninists throughout the world to build our strength and show up for our side of the struggle, the side of the exploited, oppressed, and imperialized. Back to Charlie Kirk for the last time. Here's my eulogy. He was a paid professional fascist agitator who took large checks from rich people, hoping to use him to undermine the foundations of every right that working people have and have fought for. And Charlie appeared to really enjoy this work. Let's remember his vile career with some of his own recent words and actions, such as a veiled reference to stoning LGBTQ+ people to death by invoking the Bible's Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13. This is quoting an article from LGBTQ Nation 2024. Just saying, he said, smiling as his co-hosts laughed. So, Ms. Rachel, you quote Leviticus 19, love your neighbor as yourself. The chapter before affirms God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matters, unquote. He was referring to Leviticus 18:22, which says, quote, thou shalt not lie with mankind as with womankind. It is abomination. And Leviticus 20:13, which says, quote, if a man also lie with mankind as he lieth with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination. They shall surely be put to death. Their blood shall be upon them, unquote. And here's another recent veiled reference to violence against transgender people from Kirk. Quote, I blame the decline of American men. This never should have been. Someone should have just took care of transgender people the way we used to take care of things in the 1950s or 60s. But as you have testosterone rates go down and all these men act like women and they don't do anything, there's a lot of sick people in the world, unfortunately, and without the strength to go against them, the country is going to completely, etc. As to who killed Charlie Kirk, there's been a lot of posting online about political violence, but since a shooter hasn't been apprehended, we still don't know who killed him or why. Everyone assumes it's because he was walking around for years talking like a Nazi, but it also could have just been some random nut that he owed $50 to. Let's hold off on that because I'm not sure we'll ever really know. All we know is that Kirk is gone. In closing, if you're just now getting concerned about where US politics might go from here, you and I are not the same unless you're young and just learning about all this for the first time. Going back to 9/11, I've been looking at that for over 2 decades now and trying to get more people concerned about it because predictably this is where we ended up. And it didn't have to be this way, but this is what happens when the left doesn't show up, when liberals think that they're the anti-fascist supreme, but really in practice they end up being collaborators and enablers. Well, you get to this point where the right just keeps ratcheting up the tension over and over and over. And now they want it both ways. They want to have people like Charlie Kirk out there, making it literally unsafe for tons of people. And he's just one example, and kind of a cheap one at that. But they want to have these people walking around talking like Nazis, pissing everybody off, and living in a society like this, ruled by the rich who rub it in your face in this way. I mean, it makes people very angry, it makes people very sick, but we're supposed to just act like everything's normal, and it's not normal. This is not the way we're supposed to live. This is not the way that human society should be. People really, I think, aren't built for this, but they want it where Kirk now is just remembered as some utterly normie, slightly right of center, and of course the center has been shifted so far to the right it's fallen off the map practically. But, just some utterly normie commentator, and, if you are glad that he's dead because he was making your life unsafe, that's actually something wrong with you. Well, no, there's nothing wrong with you to want to be safe. There's nothing wrong with you to want to live in peace. There's nothing wrong with you for being mad about inequality, exploitation, oppression, imperialism, genocide, war, and the fascism that ties it all together. And there was a time where fascists were afraid to openly spread this kind of shit. But they're trying to sustain a system now where they have people just going around acting as these messengers of neo-Nazism and trying to tell everybody else to just tolerate it, to accept it. Well, no. The paradox of tolerance is you can't tolerate intolerance. It's a poison, it's a cancer, it will undermine the foundation of the basic harmony that your society needs to function. But this all goes back to capitalism. Like I said, they're facing an existential crisis of their system as the rate of profit in capitalism as a whole, as a global system, trends towards zero. As Marx showed, the system itself trends toward a final crisis which it cannot resolve. In its pursuit of dwindling profits, it has to squeeze the workers harder and harder. It has to do more self-destructive environmental damage, etc. There is no way out for capitalism at this point as it continues to go into severe decay, but to give us more Charlie Kirks, but to set the planet on fire more, but to keep scapegoating innocent working people for the problems that the system itself is causing. It comes back to those people on top. We need to get them out of power. Marxism-Leninism is a proven way of understanding what's going on and of organizing to do that, and that's what we need to do. For more on that, go to the Home tab at Socialism for All, then just scroll down a little bit. You'll see a recommended reading list section. Start with the basic Marxism-Leninism study guide, or whichever other reading list appeals to you. Thanks for listening. Thanks to the supporters of this channel, and we'll see you in the next video.
The Marxist-Leninist Communist Party of Nepal, which is not communist at all. And then you have Prachanda's party. This is the Maoist party, Maoist Center party. It's yes.
Died shortly after.
Yes. Not much is known actually about. Nothing is known about who carried out the assassination, but it seems, from what I've been reading, it seems that this was it was carried out with a rifle from a certain distance from the roof of a nearby building. So it seems to be someone who was obviously familiar with long-range shooting, and someone was arrested who then happened not to be related to it. It was been released. So obviously, first of all, it's not clear who carried out this assassination or for what reason. But I will say that this fits into a pattern of a number of political violence in the United States. Political assassinations, attempted political assassinations of different types of politicians. So the first comment is that this reveals a society which is riven by all sorts of contradictions, where tensions, political, social tensions, have reached such a degree that they are bursting over in targeted political assassinations, amongst other things.
Yes, we saw the killing of, I forgot his name, the healthcare, United Health CEO, a few months ago. There's been the killing of a few Israeli
Embassy staff in Washington.
There has been also attacks against immigrants, the killing of less prominent, or not prominent people, civilians, but clearly politically motivated. There was the assassination attempt of Donald Trump.
Yes.
Was it a year ago, almost, which brought America to the precipice of a very turbulent situation, if not a civil war. Yeah, this is a sign, I guess, of a society in great turmoil. But it's a bit difficult to say something about it because we don't know what this particular thing was. Was it organized? Was it not organized? Was it political? Was it personal? Was it a not personal acquaintance? We can't say. But definitely there is a trend in American society which reflects the underlying turmoil, as you say, and the contradictions. Now, we are definitely not in agreement with Charlie Kirk.
Quite the contrary.
Quite the contrary. We are opposed to his ideas and what he represented as a political force. A lot of people on the left have been kind of celebrating his death, and it raises the question in general of terrorism as a means of political activism.
Yes.
For the left in particular. Is it justified? Some people say. Do the ends justify the means? That's the question that you're always faced with. And does it work? More importantly, does the means get you to your end?
Yes.
That's, I think, the main question.
Yes, I mean, this is all very speculative because, as you said, we don't know who carried out this assassination for what reason. But people have obviously been commenting that this is a political figure of the right wing, a reactionary, the leader or founder of Turning Point, which is kind of a very active right wing organization, mainly composed of young people. And obviously the question emerges: is it justified? Does it serve any political purpose to kill a person who's a prominent right-wing reactionary? And the position of communists, the position of Marxists about this has been discussed for a long time, over 100 years. And the position of Marxists in relation to this question is quite clear. We are opposed to individual terrorism, the individual assassination of individuals who are either prominent right-wingers or prominent state officials of repressive regimes, not for moral reasons, not for abstract moral reasons that we are in favor of defending human life in all circumstances or things like this. Or, I don't know, Biden has said that violence of this kind has no place in our political system. This is all hypocritical in reality, because the political system in the United States, the bourgeois state in the United States, has carried out political assassinations, lots of them, over a very long period of time. Assassinations of political leaders at home that were seen as a threat to capitalism, many examples. Assassination of political leaders abroad that were seen as a threat to US imperialism. And the US, Biden and Trump alike, they're supporting the state of Israel, which is carrying out the genocide in Gaza, where not one, but tens of thousands of civilians are being killed. So our opposition to individual terror is not from a moral point of view, but from a political point of view. We think that this is a rotten system. The capitalist system is a rotten, violent, oppressive system that needs to be done away with. But the only way that this can be carried out is by the collective action of the working class, the class that produces wealth, that runs society in effect. And all that which leads the working class to have more trust and confidence in its own forces, collective strength, and ability to change society is progressive. And all that which puts faith in individuals, or the individual elimination of representatives of our enemy class, is not conducive to that. And it doesn't work. There's a long history of individual terror, and Lenin's older brother actually was a member of a terrorist organization. They carried out terrorist attacks against representatives of the Tsarist monarchy and the Tsar himself.
They tried to kill the Tsar.
And they were actually quite successful. At one point they did kill the Tsar, and nothing changed. Nothing changed.
Well, something did change.
Something did
because
change.
it was used against the revolution.
Exactly.
It was
So-
used as a means to introduce a very reactionary.
One reactionary official or one monarch is replaced by another one. So fundamentally nothing changed, but obviously the ruling class uses a political assassination to criminalize the whole movement of the working class, the whole of the left, and the whole of the movement of the oppressed, and divert attention from the real culprits of violence and oppression. So it's not a useful method to advance the cause of the oppressed, and it's actually counterproductive on most cases. Trump is already saying this is the work of the radical left, and
Yeah, exactly. In the best case scenario, individual terrorism creates two illusions. One, that we're dealing with individuals and not a whole system that needs to be changed. And two, that we can do this work individually and not as a part of a class, as a social force. And both of those things are highly counterproductive.
yes.
It's the exact opposite that's needed. In fact, what we're going to discuss in this whole episode is that the only way to actually foment real change is to change the system as a whole. And that can only be done as a part of a mass movement with the highest level of organization and unified political cohesion, which none of this actually is conducive to. So I think that's as much as we can say so far. We don't know what's going to happen, how it's going to be used, what impact it's going to have on American on life in the U.S., on the class struggle. It is, as you say, hypocritical that the liberals are coming out talking about the value of life and so on. I mean, one thing is, as you say, assassinations that they carried out throughout U.S. history, but also wars that they fight, not just Israel's. How many people have been killed in Iraq, Afghanistan? You know, they talk about means and ends, but when the ends are their own profit and privilege and position as hegemons all over the planet,
Then all means are justified.
then all
from
means
their
are
point of view.
justified from their class point of view.
Yes. I mean, today is September the 11th, which
Yeah.
is the anniversary of the Pinochet coup in Chile in 1973. This is a bloody event in which tens of thousands of people were killed,
Yeah.
tortured, had to go into exile. And this was a military coup organized and funded and backed by the United States against a democratically elected government. So
Another example of related to today is 9/11, the attacks on the World Trade Center, which was a terrorist attack, which led to what? Which led to the justification for the Iraq wars, the Afghanistan wars, and all of the misery that came out of that. Okay, I think we need to move on, but we'll keep an eye out on what's going on. France, We talked about it last week.
Yes.
We predicted, as everyone else did, that Bayrou would fall. He has fallen. He's been replaced
On Monday.
On Monday, he's been replaced. Sorry, the Prime Minister Bayrou, for anyone who's not following. He's been replaced by Sébastien Lecornu. I don't know if I'm saying it correct. Who is the 5th Prime Minister in France for 3 years. And obviously, Bayrou had called. He put forward this vicious austerity budget, which was clearly not going to get through Parliament. And at the same time, a series of activists had called for a day of protest.
Yes.
Yesterday, so 10th of September, which was called Block Everything. And Bayrou realized that his budget was not going to pass. This movement was going to come up. His days were counted. So he thought, let me go out on my own terms, warning that if we don't carry out this austerity, all hell is going to break out, and we're going to have to pay for it one way or another. He wanted to go down on his own terms and not be taken down by the mass movement. Then we had the vote went as predicted, and then we had the movement yesterday, which was
very big. I mean, the first thing that we need to say about this is that this movement had not been called or organized by anyone in particular, particularly not the major trade unions and not the left parties, although obviously Mélenchon's party, La France Insoumise, quite correctly supported the movement, but the movement started spontaneously a few weeks earlier, and it's not even very clear who started this call for protests on September 10th under this slogan of block everything. Some people say there were some right-wing accounts online that were pushing this. But regardless of this was just an accident. There was so much pressure building up in French society, not just about the austerity program, but about a whole number of other things, including the Palestine, the massacre in Gaza, the genocide in Gaza carried out by Israel, and the support that the French state and government, French imperialism, is giving to that. The repression of pro-Palestine activists, a whole number of things have been building up, and the fact that there was one date, which was set a date for protest, galvanized the whole thing, crystallized this big movement. Now, what happened on the 10th yesterday was that hundreds of thousands of people participated in these protests. There were, according to Unity CGT, which is the left wing of the CGT trade union, there were 700, I think, unions, like workplace unions, that put in a call for strike, including amongst the teachers, the civil servants, part of the transport workers, the energy workers, and a whole number of other sectors that went out on strike. But as well as that, tens of thousands of activists across France organized actions to blockade the access to industrial areas, the transportation, the main train and railway stations, and then there were big demonstrations, kind of at lunchtime or mid-morning. There were big demonstrations across France. I think, for instance, one of the biggest ones was in Marseille, with about 80,000, according to the CGT. You look at the pictures of Nantes, in Montpellier, Nanterre, Lyon, a whole number of cities, big and small, so mass demonstrations. And the main characteristic is the participation of the youth. The youth were at the forefront of this movement. There were a whole number of school students who were out on strike, university students. And the movement was very radical, very upbeat, very determined, very angry, and mainly directed against Macron. So the idea was, the government has fallen, the prime minister is gone, now we have another prime minister, nothing's changed. We want the whole system to go, we want the whole regime to go. And so it was a big day of mobilizations. I will say a significant element of it was, there was also brutal police repression. The government said, this is not going to happen, there's not going to be blockades. And never mind the blockades, the riot police was attacking peaceful demonstrators in normal demonstrations in the city centers and so on in a brutal manner. Then in the afternoon, in the late afternoon, there were general assemblies or people's assemblies in most cities involving thousands or tens of thousands of people to decide what to do the day after being today. In some places, blockades are continuing, demonstrations are continuing. And then further on, there's the 18th, that is next week, the 18th of September, the big trade union confederation, the CGT, by attempting not to get themselves involved in the big action on the 10th, which they fear they cannot control, they had called for the day of action, day of strikes, on the 18th of September. So basically now that's become the next rallying point for the movement. There's going to be actions in between, today, tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, but there's a new focal point for the mobilization on the 18th. I think that this is a very significant movement. France has a certain tradition of spontaneous movements. Some people have compared this to the Yellow Vest movement a few years ago. But basically what it means is, I find it quite extraordinary that no mass organization, the CGT, no trade union has actually put the whole weight behind this, and nevertheless, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have turned up.
Although Mélenchon did support it.
Mélenchon openly supported it, said we must turn the 10th into a general strike, quite correctly, but you wouldn't necessarily think that it is the France Insoumise, his party, that has organized this. This is down to rank-and-file organizations, campaigns, local unions, local student organizations, local activist groups, but in a scale that this is now a nationwide movement, or the beginning of a nationwide movement. I think it's very significant of the whole mood of anger and opposition that exists in France.
And I would say, when you talk with people on the left, there's always this kind of moaning. Oh, people don't want to do anything. But wait a minute, where are the leaders? As you say, this is a damning indictment of every left-wing trade union, social organization, for not having tapped into this mood. The mood that is out there is a mood of rage and anger. Now, the figures yesterday, I think some organizers said about 250,000 people in total. I don't know if significant amounts of people came out on the basis of grassroots organizations. Probably a lot of ordinary people weren't really aware of what was going on. A lot of ordinary working class people, even though it was big, couldn't see the significance of this. So this is an initial, the fact that you can, on this basis, just by calling it randomly, bring out 250,000 people, tells us something about the actual anger and potential that exists. But it's not being brought to the surface by the, complacency of the leaders of the
organized movement.
Of the organized movement. The fact that the main trade unions put a strike day 8 days later.
Yes.
There can only be one reason.
To divert attention from this day.
By the leaders, of course. We're not talking about the membership, but by the leaders who are afraid that a movement like this could run out of control.
Yes.
But nevertheless, you can't, at a certain point, if pressure, if you have I have a pressure cooker that I've started using a lot recently. I made bone broth the other day.
Okay.
But there is a valve in a pressure cooker, and if the valve is stuck,
you'll have an explosion.
Sooner or later, something will have to give, right? Either you have to mess with it. That's what they're trying to do on the 18th. But the thing is that the pressure is already so high that they can't really stop it right now.
Yes. The French comrades of the RCI, the Revolutionary Communist Party in France, they put out an editorial today, which they're making a balance sheet of the movement yesterday, and they make one very important point, which is that France has seen a strategy by the trade union leaders for many years of isolated days of action.
Yes.
Which they don't even call it a general strike, right? So they just say, okay, well, if you can strike, you strike. If you're not, you come to a demonstration. It's not even a proper call.
There's like balloons and there's like a festival mode.
Yes,
almost, like streets.
sausage burning and stuff like that. And
guess.
but the thing is that these are isolated days of action. So you have one day of action on the 18th, and then that's a big success. People turn up, and then you have another day of action, say on 25th, or maybe a month later, and then you have another day until people are exhausted. They don't see that this is leading anywhere, and people stop turning up at the days of action. And then the leaders say, "Oh, look, we are calling for action, but
no
people
one wants to fight."
That's right. So this has been the experience, for instance, with the big movement. Was it 2 or 3 years ago? The big movement against the pension counter reform.
Yeah.
And then it fizzled out. So the comrades are saying this is already now a very, I mean, many people understand that isolated days of action don't work, and what the comrades are calling for, and many people, including the CGT unity, the left wing of the CGT, they're calling for an all-out strike, or what in France is called renewable strikes, which means that you go on strike for an open-ended period, and then every day there's general assemblies deciding whether to continue the movement or not. This is the only way forward, building up to a proper general strike that can bring down the government and Macron himself. But obviously, at the end of this article, the question is posed, but obviously if you have a movement like that, which is completely necessary, why is it necessary? Because these cuts, these massive austerity measures, they're not just the whim of a nasty politician who happens to be the prime minister. No, they are necessary from the point of view of French capitalism.
Yes.
They have a massive debt, massive budget deficit. They have to implement these cuts. And therefore, the question that's posed is, I mean, who rules the country? This government is extremely unpopular. The president is extremely unpopular. I think his popularity is down to 10%, and with 85% in opposition. And the majority of the people are against these measures, but nevertheless, the government remains. And so the comrades are saying that the only slogan at this time is the slogan of a workers' government. A government that represents the interest of the majority, people who are on the streets, and they are in opposition to these measures. This puts into question the capitalist system itself in reality.
Yes. Speaking of consciousness, just following on the thread from our first segment, what you see is precisely by calling these 1 days of action, and then pulling back and tiring out the movement, what you actually see is the working class in a way losing confidence in its own powers. But what you see in a situation like this is what in a situation like where the thing explodes out, and before the movement has even taken off, it's actually overthrown a government.
Mm-hmm.
That
Yes.
raises the confidence of the working class. In normal times, we're told by politicians that ordinary people can't rule. What you need is experts, is politicians, is professionals, is people with suits and ties who can speak in a certain way.
With titles.
With titles, yes.
University degrees.
Exactly. And in reality, obviously, they're the people representing the ruling class who've dragged society down to where it is now. But as a movement develops, what the significance of a revolution, this is not a revolution, but if it should become one, and the process of revolutionary development of consciousness is precisely that people realize, that the working class realizes that we are actually far more capable and suited to run society
Yes.
than the ruling classes. And that is what the trade union leaders
Are afraid of.
are afraid of,
Yeah.
in essence. That's what they're afraid of.
The other thing, I've been reading some of the editorials in the French media and so on, and obviously no one gives 5 cents for this new government of, what's his name, Le Cornu. This government is not going to last, because this is a government that needs to implement the same measures. But then some people are saying that there's kind of two angles. One is, but what Mélenchon wants is chaos, terror. So as we said last week, they're talking about the terror during the French Revolution and all that. Never mind the fact that what is really terrorific is the measures that they want to implement: cutting 2 days holidays, cutting pensions, lengthening the pension age, and so on. This is really terrorizing working people. But anyway, they want to give this impression, right? It's either us or chaos and terror and violence and all of that. The other idea that they're saying is, but Mélenchon says that there should be the dissolution of the National Assembly, that Macron should go. But what's the alternative? Then the far right will come in. And this is a very insidious argument, isn't it? Because what they're basically saying is, you need to support these austerity measures, this capitalist rule. The workers must support the capitalists in order to prevent the far right from coming in. But if you look at it in reality, what is provoking, what is driving the rise of Le Pen and the so-called far right is precisely the opposition against the establishment parties, against austerity measures, which Le Pen is